The elevator doors hadn't even closed when my stepchild said the words that would change everything. "I never loved you, you old fool. 14 years of pretending to care, and now I finally get what I deserve." What she didn't know was that the small audio recorder in my purse had been running for the past 20 minutes. My name is Margaret Louise Henderson, though most folks in Madison, Wisconsin just call me Grandma Maggie. At 73 years old, I'd lived through enough to fill several lifetimes, raised 4 children of my own, helped raise 7 grandchildren, and for the past 14 years, I'd been trying to love my stepchild, Rebecca, as if she were my own blood. The morning of October 15th started like any other autumn day in Wisconsin. The maple trees outside my modest 2-story home had turned brilliant shades of red and gold, and there was that familiar crisp in the air that meant winter wasn't far behind. I'd woken up at 5:30 a.m., as I had every day for the past 50 years, made my coffee with exactly 2 sugars and a splash of cream, and sat at my kitchen table reviewing the paperwork for what was supposed to be a routine benefits enrollment meeting. The papers spread before me represented a lifetime of careful planning and sacrifice. My late husband Harold and I had worked our fingers to the bone, he at the paper mill for 37 years, and me taking in sewing and alterations while raising our children. We'd scrimped and saved, driven the same cars for decades, patched clothes instead of buying new ones, all so we could leave something meaningful behind for our family. What we'd managed to accumulate over those years of sacrifice would have surprised most people who knew us. The modest house we lived in, the 10-year-old Honda Civic in the driveway, these were choices, not limitations. Hidden away in various investment accounts, life insurance policies, and a trust we'd established 15 years ago, was nearly $500,000. $500,000, to be exact, though I'd never told a soul except my lawyer the true amount. Rebecca came into our lives when she was 25, a struggling single mother who'd captured the heart of my eldest son, Thomas. At first, I'd been skeptical. What mother isn't when their child brings home someone new? But Rebecca had a way about her, a vulnerability mixed with determination that reminded me of myself at that age. She'd grown up in foster care, she told us, bounced from home to home, never knowing real family love. "I just want to belong somewhere," she'd said to me one evening, tears streaming down her face as we sat on my back porch watching fireflies dance in the summer twilight. "I want my daughter to have the grandmother I never had." Those words had melted my heart completely. From that day forward, I threw myself into being the mother figure Rebecca had never known. I taught her my secret recipes, the ones even my own daughters hadn't managed to master. I spent countless hours helping her study for her nursing degree, quizzing her on medical terminology late into the night. When she and Thomas struggled financially, I quietly paid their rent for 6 months, never breathing a word of it to anyone else in the family. I attended every school play, every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference for Rebecca's daughter, my step-granddaughter Melissa. When Rebecca worked double shifts at the hospital, I was there, making sure Melissa had hot meals, help with homework, and someone to tuck her in at night. I loved that little girl as fiercely as I loved my biological grandchildren, and I thought Rebecca appreciated it. For 14 years, I poured love into Rebecca like water into a garden, waiting to see her bloom into the confident, secure woman I knew she could be. I defended her when other family members criticized her spending habits. I took her side when she and Thomas argued. I even changed my will 2 years ago to ensure she'd be taken care of if something happened to Thomas. But there were signs I chose to ignore, little red flags that I dismissed as paranoia or unfairness on my part. The way Rebecca's stories about her past would change slightly each time she told them. The expensive purchases that would appear even as she complained about being broke. The way she'd whisper on phone calls and quickly hang up when I entered the room. The fact that Melissa would sometimes let slip mentions of Grandma's special friend who visited when I wasn't around, a man Thomas apparently knew nothing about. My own daughter, Patricia, had tried to warn me 6 months ago. "Mom, something's not right with Rebecca," she'd said over lunch at our favorite diner. "I saw her at the casino last week when she told Thomas she was at a medical conference. And she was with someone, a man who definitely wasn't Thomas." "You must be mistaken," I'd replied, cutting her off. "Rebecca would never do something like that. She loves this family." Patricia had sighed, stirring her coffee with unnecessary force. "Mom, you always see the best in people. It's one of the things I love about you, but sometimes people aren't who they pretend to be." I dismissed Patricia's concerns as jealousy. After all, I'd been spending a lot of time with Rebecca lately, helping her with what she'd told me was a special project at work. She needed to present a comprehensive benefits package to the hospital board, she'd said, and wanted my input as someone who'd navigated Medicare and various insurance plans. We'd spent hours going over documents, with Rebecca taking copious notes and asking detailed questions about my own insurance policies and benefits. "You're so organized, Grandma Maggie," she'd gushed just last week. "I don't know how you keep track of all these policies and accounts. Thomas is lucky to have you managing everything." I'd been flattered by her attention, her seeming desire to learn from my experience. It felt good to be needed, to have my knowledge valued. Since Harold's death 5 years ago, I'd often felt like a burden to my children, someone they worried about rather than turned to for advice. Rebecca made me feel useful again, important. The benefits enrollment meeting had been Rebecca's idea. She'd called me 2 weeks ago, breathless with excitement. "Grandma Maggie, the hospital is offering this amazing new benefits package for family members of employees. It could save you thousands on your medications, and there's even a provision for long-term care insurance at a fraction of the normal cost. But you have to enroll in person, and the deadline is October 15th. She'd offered to drive me to the appointment, said she'd already taken the day off work to make sure I didn't have to navigate the complicated insurance office building in downtown Madison alone. "That old elevator in the Bradshaw building is so finicky," she'd said. "I don't want you getting stuck in there by yourself." I'd been touched by her concern. My health hadn't been the best lately, a series of small strokes the previous year had left me a bit unsteady on my feet, and my doctor had recently mentioned some concerning test results that needed further investigation. The possibility of affordable long-term care insurance seemed like a blessing, a way to ensure I wouldn't become a financial burden if my health continued to decline. What I hadn't told Rebecca, what I hadn't told anyone except my lawyer, was that I'd recently received a second opinion on those test results. The specialist in Milwaukee had reviewed all my scans and blood work and come to a very different conclusion than my regular doctor. "Mrs. Henderson," he'd said, barely able to contain his smile, "I don't know what your other doctor saw, but these results show no signs of the degenerative condition he diagnosed. In fact, for a woman your age, you're in remarkably good health. With proper medication for your blood pressure, you could easily live another 15 or 20 years. I'd kept this information to myself, partly because I was still processing it, and partly because I wanted to surprise my family at my birthday dinner next month. After months of thinking I might not see another Christmas, the relief of knowing I had years ahead of me was almost overwhelming. I'd already started making plans, trips I wanted to take, projects I wanted to complete, a memoir I'd always dreamed of writing about my life with Harold. But first, I had to get through this benefits enrollment. Rebecca had been so insistent, so helpful, that I didn't want to disappoint her by canceling. Besides, good long-term care insurance was nothing to sneeze at, even if I didn't need it immediately. The morning of October 15th, Rebecca arrived at my house 30 minutes early, which should have been my first warning. In 14 years, she'd never been early for anything. She was dressed differently too, gone were the casual scrubs or jeans she usually wore. Instead, she had on an expensive-looking business suit I'd never seen before, her hair professionally styled, her makeup flawless. "You look lovely, dear," I said as she helped me into her car, a new Lexus that had replaced her old Toyota just last month. "Special occasion at work today?" "Something like that," she replied, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Did you bring all the paperwork I asked for?" I patted my large purse. "Everything's right here, just like you asked. Insurance cards, social security card, bank statements for the direct deposit, power of attorney documents, and those investment account summaries you said they might need." "Perfect," she said, pulling out of my driveway a bit too quickly. "You're always so prepared, Grandma Maggie." The drive to downtown Madison was unusually quiet. Normally, Rebecca would chatter away about Melissa's school activities or gossip from the hospital, but today she seemed tense, checking her phone at every red light and drumming her fingers on the steering wheel. "Is everything all right, dear?" I asked as we pulled into the parking garage of the Bradshaw building. "You seem nervous." "Just want to make sure we're not late," she said, practically jumping out of the car. "The enrollment counselor can only see us for a short window." The Bradshaw building was one of those old Madison office buildings that had been built in the 1960s and never quite updated. The lobby still had that aged marble flooring that had turned yellow over the decades, and the single-passenger elevator was notorious for breaking down. As we waited for it to arrive, I noticed Rebecca checking her phone again, then quickly typing a message. "Thomas wondering where you are?" I asked. She startled, almost dropping her phone. What? Oh, yes. Thomas. He's in a meeting. I was just letting him know we made it here safely. The elevator arrived with a grinding sound that made me wince. The building manager had been promising to fix it for years, but somehow never got around to it. We stepped inside, and Rebecca pressed the button for the 7th floor. As the doors closed, I felt a strange flutter in my stomach, not quite fear, but something close to it. That's when I remembered the audio recorder. I'd bought it 6 months ago when I started writing down memories for my memoir. The little device, no bigger than a pack of gum, had been a godsend for capturing thoughts and stories when my arthritis made writing painful. I dropped it in my purse that morning, planning to record some thoughts about Harold during the drive home. On impulse, as the elevator lurched upward, I reached into my purse as if looking for a mint and pressed the record button. The elevator stopped at the 3rd floor, though no one got on. Then the 5th. Each time, Rebecca seemed to grow more agitated, repeatedly pressing the closed door button and muttering under her breath. Finally, we reached the 7th floor, but instead of opening onto a bustling insurance office as I'd expected, the hallway was dark, with only emergency lighting providing dim illumination. That's odd, I said. Are they closed? Rebecca didn't answer. She grabbed my arm, not gently, and steered me down the hallway to a door marked Conference Room C. Inside, instead of an insurance representative, a man in an expensive suit sat at a polished table, multiple documents spread before him. He was maybe 45, with calculating eyes and a smile that reminded me of a snake. Mrs. Henderson, he said, standing and extending his hand. I'm James Carlyle. I'll be handling your enrollment today. I shook his hand reluctantly, my unease growing. I thought we were meeting with someone from the insurance company? I represent several insurance companies, he said smoothly. Please, have a seat. Rebecca has told me so much about you. As I sat down, I noticed Rebecca lock the door behind us. My heart began to pound, but I kept my face calm, my hands folded in my lap. 73 years of living had taught me when to stay quiet and observe. Now then, Carlyle said, sliding a stack of papers toward me, Rebecca has explained your situation. With your recent health issues and the diagnosis your doctor gave you, it's important we get your affairs in order quickly. My affairs? I repeated slowly. Your benefits, of course. But also, we should discuss the management of your assets. Rebecca mentioned you have several investment accounts that need to be properly designated to ensure they're protected. I looked at Rebecca, who wouldn't meet my eyes. Rebecca, what is this about? She finally looked at me, and the mask she'd worn for 14 years slipped completely. The warmth I'd always seen in her eyes was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. It's about being practical, Grandma Maggie. You're sick. The doctor said you might not have much time left. We need to make sure everything is properly handled before it's too late. And by properly handled, you mean what exactly? Carlyle slid a document toward me. This is a simple transfer of power of attorney. It would give Rebecca the ability to manage your financial affairs when you're no longer able to do so yourself. Standard procedure for someone in your condition. I picked up the document, my reading glasses perched on my nose as I scanned the legal language. What I saw made my blood run cold. This wasn't just a power of attorney, it was a complete transfer of all my assets to Rebecca, effective immediately. This gives Rebecca control of everything, I said quietly. My house, my investments, my life insurance policies. Everything. Which is what's best, Rebecca said, her voice taking on a tone I'd never heard before, impatient, almost angry. You're old, you're sick, and you're going to die soon anyway. At least this way, the money goes to someone who actually needs it, instead of being split among children who already have enough. The words hit me like physical blows. I set the papers down carefully, my hands surprisingly steady despite the rage building inside me. And if I refuse to sign? Rebecca laughed, actually laughed. Then we go to Plan B. I have recordings of you saying you want me to have everything. I have witnesses who will swear you've been showing signs of dementia. Hell, I've been documenting your confusion and memory lapses for the past 2 years, just in case. Either you sign willingly, or we have you declared incompetent and I get guardianship anyway. You've been planning this for 2 years? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Longer, she said, moving to stand behind Carlyle. Did you really think I enjoyed spending all that time with you? Listening to your boring stories about Harold? Pretending to care about your stupid recipes and your garden? God, these past 14 years have been torture. Pure torture. Do you know how hard it's been to pretend to love you? Each word was a dagger, but I forced myself to remain calm. And Thomas? Your marriage? She shrugged. Thomas is convenient. He'll get his share eventually, enough to keep him happy and stupid. But the real money, that's mine. Payment for 14 years of pretending to be part of your perfect little family. What about Melissa? I asked. Your daughter who calls me grandma? She's not even Thomas's kid, Rebecca said with a cruel smile. Another lie you fell for. Her real father is someone who actually has ambition, someone who helped me plan all this. She gestured to Carlyle, who gave a mock bow. The pieces fell into place. The mysterious man Patricia had seen her with. The whispered phone calls. Melissa's mentions of Grandma's special friend. They'd been together all along, planning this betrayal while I'd loved and trusted blindly. So, Carlyle said, pushing a pen toward me, shall we proceed with the signatures? I have a notary waiting in the next room to make everything official. I picked up the pen, feeling its weight. Rebecca and Carlyle exchanged triumphant looks. What they didn't know was that I'd spent 40 years as a legal secretary before retiring. I knew exactly what these documents were, what they meant, and more importantly, what they were missing. Before I sign, I said slowly, I want to know something. The visits you canceled, all those times you said Melissa was sick or you had to work, were those lies too? Rebecca rolled her eyes. Of course they were lies. Do you think I wanted to spend my weekends watching you putter around your garden or looking at old photo albums? The only reason I ever came over was to gather information about your finances. Once I knew about the $500,000, the visits became unnecessary. $500,000, I repeated. That's what you think I have? Don't play dumb, Rebecca snapped. I've seen the statements. I know exactly what you're worth. I almost smiled. She'd seen the statements I'd wanted her to see, the ones for the accounts Thomas knew about. The other $3,700,000 Harold and I had accumulated through careful investments and a life insurance policy from his union she knew nothing about. Those statements were in a safety deposit box she didn't even know existed. And my diagnosis? I asked. The one that says I'm dying? A gift from heaven, Rebecca said. Though honestly, we were prepared to wait as long as it took. But when your doctor said you had maybe a year left, it seemed like the perfect time to move forward. I see, I said, setting down the pen. And you're completely certain about all of this? About taking everything from an old woman who loved you? I never loved you, Rebecca said, leaning forward, her face twisted with 14 years of suppressed hatred. Not for 1 second. You were nothing but a means to an end, a pathetic old woman so desperate for family that you'd believe anything. The foster care sob story? Made it up. The struggles as a single mother? Fabricated. Everything I ever told you was calculated to make you trust me, to make you love me, to make you vulnerable to exactly this moment. She straightened up, smoothing her expensive suit. And now, after 14 years of torture, 14 years of pretending to care about your boring life, I'm finally getting what I deserve. Every penny you saved, every investment Harold made working himself to death at that mill, it's all going to be mine. And the beautiful part is, you're going to give it to me willingly because the alternative is spending your last months in a court battle you'll lose, being declared incompetent, and dying alone in a state-run facility while I spend your money anyway. Carlyle cleared his throat. The notary is charging by the hour, Mrs. Henderson. We really should proceed. I stood up slowly, my purse clutched in my hands. I need a moment. This is a lot to process. Sit down, Rebecca commanded. You're not leaving until these papers are signed. I'm not leaving, I assured her. I just need to take my heart medication. The stress. Rebecca waved dismissively. Fine. But make it quick. I reached into my purse, past the medication bottle, past the tissues and mints, and felt the small recorder still running. Then I pulled out my phone. What are you doing? Carlyle demanded, starting to rise from his chair. I'm calling my lawyer, I said calmly. You see, there's something you both should know. This entire conversation has been recorded. I pulled out the small device, its red light still blinking. Every word, every threat, every admission of fraud and elder abuse. The color drained from Rebecca's face so quickly I thought she might faint. Carlisle, the smooth-talking snake, suddenly looked like a cornered rat, his eyes darting between the door and the recorder in my hand. That's illegal," Rebecca stammered. "Wisconsin is a two-party consent state. You can't record without our permission." I smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd felt in hours. "Actually, dear, Wisconsin is a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation consents to the recording, and that would be me, it's perfectly legal. 40 years as a legal secretary taught me a few things." "You're lying," Carlisle said, though his voice lacked conviction. "That recorder isn't even on." I pressed the playback button, and Rebecca's voice filled the room. "I never loved you. Not for 1 second. You were nothing but a means to an end. Turn it off." Rebecca lunged for the device, but I stepped back, surprisingly agile for a woman she'd believed was dying. "There's more," I said, my voice steady now, filled with a strength I'd forgotten I possessed. "You see, Rebecca, when you thought you were gathering information about my finances, I was gathering information too. That new Lexus you're driving? I know it's in Carlisle's name. The trips to the casino Patricia saw? I have copies of the credit card statements, the cards you opened in Thomas's name without his knowledge. The affair you've been having? Melissa didn't just mention your special friend to me. She mentioned him to her teacher, who mentioned it to me at the last parent-teacher conference." Rebecca sank into a chair, her carefully styled hair falling across her face. "You knew?" "I suspected," I admitted. "I hoped I was wrong. I wanted so desperately to believe that you loved this family, that you loved me. But hope doesn't make you stupid, and love doesn't make you blind. So I prepared, just in case." My phone buzzed. That would be my lawyer now. He's been waiting in the lobby this entire time, along with 2 police officers who are very interested in discussing attempted fraud, elder abuse, and identity theft with you both. Carlisle made a break for the door, fumbling with the lock Rebecca had turned earlier. "This is entrapment. You set us up." "No," I said firmly. "I gave you every opportunity to be the family you pretended to be. This meeting? You arranged it. The fraudulent documents? You prepared them. The threats and admissions? Those came from your mouths, not mine. All I did was press record." The door burst open, but instead of Carlisle escaping, 2 uniformed officers entered, followed by my lawyer, Robert Steinberg, a bulldog of a man who'd been protecting my interests for 30 years. "Mrs. Henderson," Robert said warmly, "are you all right?" "I'm fine, Robert. Though these 2 might need your card. They're going to need a good lawyer." As the officers read Miranda rights to a stunned Rebecca and a blustering Carlisle, I turned to my stepdaughter one last time. "You asked what you thought I had, $500,000. You were wrong about that, like you were wrong about so much else. Harold and I saved nearly $4 million over our lifetime. Money that will now go to our biological children and grandchildren, to charities we believe in, and to establishing a scholarship fund for children aging out of foster care, real foster children who need real help." Rebecca's eyes widened. 4 million? 3,700,000, to be exact. Hidden in accounts you never knew existed, protected by trusts you never discovered, managed by people who actually care about my well-being. You spent 14 years chasing $500,000, destroying your marriage, traumatizing your daughter, and ruining your life for money you were never going to get anyway. The irony wasn't lost on her. I could see it in her eyes, the realization that she'd played a long game and lost, that her greed had cost her everything for nothing. "What about Thomas?" she asked as the officers prepared to lead her away. "What are you going to tell him?" "The truth," I said simply. "Something you should have tried sometime in the last 14 years. He deserves to know who he married, who the mother of the child he's been raising is. He deserves the chance to make his own choices based on facts, not lies." "He'll never believe you over me," she said desperately. "I'm his wife." I held up the recorder again. "He'll believe his own ears. And more importantly, he'll believe Melissa when she tells him about the special friend who's been visiting while he's at work. Children are remarkably honest when asked direct questions." As the officers led them away, Carlisle in handcuffs and Rebecca in tears that I suspected were more about getting caught than any real remorse, Robert sat down beside me, his hand gentle on my shoulder. "You okay, Maggie? Really okay?" I considered the question. My heart was broken, not just for me but for Thomas and especially for Melissa, who would grow up knowing her mother had been living a lie. But there was also relief, a weight lifted that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. I said honestly. But first, I need to call Thomas. He needs to hear this from me before he hears it from anyone else. The call to Thomas was one of the hardest I'd ever had to make. At first, he didn't believe me. Even when I played him portions of the recording, he insisted there had to be some explanation, some misunderstanding. It wasn't until he confronted Rebecca at the police station, and she admitted everything in a last-ditch attempt to negotiate a plea deal, that the reality sank in. The divorce was swift and uncontested. Rebecca, facing charges of fraud, elder abuse, and identity theft, had little room to negotiate. She gave up all claims to marital assets in exchange for Thomas not pressing additional charges related to the credit cards she'd opened in his name. Carlisle, it turned out, had a history of similar schemes and was looking at serious prison time. Rebecca managed to avoid jail but received 5 years of probation and was ordered to pay restitution for the money she'd stolen through the fraudulent credit cards. The hardest part was explaining everything to Melissa. At 10 years old, she was old enough to understand that her mother had done something wrong, but young enough to be devastated by it. Thomas and I decided together that she needed therapy, needed support, and most importantly, needed to know that she was loved unconditionally by the family that remained. "Grandma Maggie," she said to me one afternoon about a month after everything had fallen apart, as we worked together in my garden, planting tulip bulbs for spring, "Mom lied about loving you, but you really love me, right? Even though I'm not really your granddaughter?" I knelt down, my knees protesting, and took her dirt-smudged face in my hands. "Melissa Henderson, you listen to me. Blood doesn't make you family, love does. And I have loved you from the moment I met you, and I will love you until the day I die, and probably even after that. You are my granddaughter in every way that matters." She threw her arms around my neck, sobbing, and I held her as tightly as my old arms could manage. In that moment, I realized that Rebecca's betrayal, painful as it was, hadn't destroyed the real family we'd built. If anything, it had made us stronger, more honest, more appreciative of the genuine love we shared. The truth about my health came out during a family dinner a week after Rebecca's arrest. When I announced that the diagnosis had been wrong, that I wasn't dying after all, the relief and joy on my children's faces was like sunshine after a storm. Patricia actually cried, something I hadn't seen her do since Harold's funeral. "Mom," she said, hyping at her tears, "I'm so sorry I wasn't more insistent about Rebecca. I should have pushed harder, should have made you see." "Stop," I said firmly. "You tried to warn me, and I chose not to listen. That's on me, not you. But you know what? I'm not sorry it happened." They all looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Thomas, still struggling with the betrayal, shook his head. "Mom, how can you say that? She tried to steal everything from you. She lied to all of us for 14 years. "Yes," I agreed, "she did. But think about what those 14 years gave us. They gave us Melissa, who, regardless of her biology, is a Henderson through and through. They taught us the value of vigilance, the importance of protecting ourselves while still being open to love. And they gave me a story, one hell of a story that's going to be the centerpiece of my memoir." "You're still writing that?" asked my youngest son, Michael, who'd driven up from Chicago when he heard about everything. "More than ever," I said, pulling out a notebook filled with my handwriting. The working title is "The Recording She Never Knew I Had, A Grandmother's Story of Love, Betrayal, and Redemption." My publisher friend thinks it could be a bestseller. "You have a publisher friend?" Patricia asked, surprised. I smiled. "There's a lot you don't know about your old mother. That's something else Rebecca's betrayal taught me. I'd been so focused on being the mother and grandmother you all needed that I forgot to be Maggie. Well, that changes now." And change it did. With the health scare behind me and the Rebecca drama settled, I threw myself into projects I'd been putting off for years. I finished the first draft of my memoir in 3 months, pouring all the pain, anger, love, and ultimately forgiveness into its pages. The local community college asked me to teach a senior seminar on financial planning and fraud protection, which I accepted gladly. I even started dating, nothing serious, just coffee with a nice widower named Frank from my gardening club who made me laugh and didn't care that I came with complicated family drama. The $500,000 Rebecca had known about? I set it aside in a trust for Melissa's education and future. She would have opportunities her mother had tried to steal from everyone else. The rest of the money was distributed as Harold and I had always planned, portions to each of our biological children, significant donations to the food bank where we'd volunteered for decades, and yes, that scholarship fund for foster children aging out of the system. Why foster kids? Thomas asked when I told him about the scholarship. After everything Rebecca lied about? Because somewhere out there are real kids with real struggles who need real help, I explained. Rebecca lied about being one of them, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. If anything, her lies make it more important to help the ones telling the truth. The scholarship fund was named after Harold, the Harold Henderson Hope Fund. The first recipient was a young woman named Sarah who'd aged out of foster care at 18 and was working 3 jobs to pay for community college. When she came to thank me in person, tears streaming down her face, I saw in her the vulnerability Rebecca had pretended to have, but this time it was real. Mrs. Henderson, Sarah said, clutching my hands, you don't know what this means to me. I was about to drop out. I couldn't afford the textbooks, let alone tuition. This scholarship, it's saving my life. Then make something of it, I told her firmly. Study hard, build a good life, and someday, when you're able, help someone else the way you've been helped. That's all Harold and I ever wanted, to make ripples of kindness that would spread beyond us. 6 months after the incident in the Bradshaw building, I received a letter from Rebecca. She was living in Milwaukee, working at a grocery store, and going through court-mandated therapy. The letter was long, rambling, and full of self-pity, but buried in the middle was something that might have been genuine remorse. I don't expect you to forgive me, she wrote. I wouldn't forgive me. But I wanted you to know that the therapy is helping me understand why I did what I did. The foster care story wasn't entirely a lie. I was abandoned by my mother when I was 3, raised by a grandmother who resented having to take care of me. She died when I was 17, leaving me nothing but anger and a twisted idea that the world owed me something for my pain. You were everything she wasn't, loving, generous, kind. I think part of me hated you for that, for showing me what I missed, what I could have had. It doesn't excuse what I did, but maybe it explains it a little. I read the letter 3 times before deciding what to do with it. Finally, I wrote back a single paragraph. Rebecca, I appreciate your letter and the work you're doing in therapy. I cannot offer you forgiveness, that's something you'll have to find for yourself. What I can offer is hope that you'll use this experience to become better, to break the cycle of hurt that started long before you met us. Melissa still loves you, despite everything. Don't waste that love. Be better for her. Be the mother she deserves, even if it's from a distance. That's all any of us can do, be better today than we were yesterday. I never heard from her again, but Thomas told me she'd started sending appropriate letters to Melissa, approved by the therapist and the court. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. The Bradshaw building elevator was finally fixed, though I never rode in it again. The building itself was sold and converted into luxury apartments, the dark 7th floor where my trust had been shattered transformed into someone's bright living space. Sometimes I drove past it, not out of nostalgia or pain, but as a reminder of my own strength, my own survival. Grandma Maggie, Melissa asked me one day as we planted spring flowers in the garden, the Wisconsin winter finally giving way to warmth, do you ever wish none of it happened? That mom had been who she pretended to be? I considered the question, my hands deep in the dark soil, feeling life ready to bloom. You know, sweetheart, there's a Japanese art called kintsugi where they repair broken pottery with gold. The idea is that the breakage becomes part of the object's history, making it more beautiful and valuable than it was before. That's how I feel about what happened. Yes, it broke me for a while, but the way we've all come back together, stronger and more honest, that's our gold. That's what makes us beautiful. She nodded, wise beyond her 11 years. So we're like a fancy broken plate? I laughed, the sound carrying across the garden like music. The fanciest broken plate you ever saw, my dear. And you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way. The memoir was published on my 75th birthday. The recording she never knew I had became a regional bestseller and was eventually optioned for a television movie, though I insisted they tone down some of the drama, reality was unbelievable enough. The book signing at the local Barnes & Noble was packed. Patricia and Michael flanked me at the table, while Thomas managed the line of people waiting to get their copies signed. Melissa, now 13 and blooming into a confident young woman, helped hand out bookmarks I'd had made with Harold's picture and the quote, "Family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up when life gets hard." Halfway through the signing, I noticed a familiar face in line. My doctor, the one who'd given me the wrong diagnosis that had inadvertently triggered Rebecca's final play. He looked nervous, uncertain, clutching a copy of the book. When he reached the table, he could barely meet my eyes. Mrs. Henderson, I wanted to apologize. I've read your book. If my misdiagnosis contributed to what happened. Dr. Martin, I interrupted gently, you made a mistake. It happens. But that mistake might have saved me in a strange way. If Rebecca hadn't thought I was dying, she might have waited years more to make her move, might have succeeded when I was actually vulnerable. Your error forced her hand when I was still strong enough to fight back. Relief flooded his face. That's generous of you to say. It's honest, I corrected. I've learned the hard way that holding on to anger is like holding on to a hot coal, you're the only one who gets burned. Besides, you've learned from the mistake, haven't you? You require second opinions now for serious diagnoses? He nodded vigorously. Always. Your case changed how I practice medicine. Then something good came from it, I said, signing his book with a special note, to Dr. Martin, we all make mistakes. It's what we do after that defines us. Keep healing. Maggie. As the signing wound down, Frank appeared with roses, Wisconsin-grown, hardy, survivors like us, he said with a wink. We'd been dating steadily for a year, and there was talk of maybe making it official, though at our age, we were in no rush. Time was precious, yes, but that made it more important to savor rather than hurry through. That evening, the whole family gathered at my house for a celebration dinner. The table that had once hidden so many secrets and lies now rang with genuine laughter. Melissa had made her first attempt at my secret recipe pot roast. It wasn't quite right, but it was made with love, and that seasoned it perfectly. A toast, Thomas said, raising his glass of the good wine we'd saved for special occasions. To Mom, who taught us that strength isn't about never falling, it's about how you get back up. To Grandma Maggie, who showed us that love doesn't make you weak, it makes you brave enough to trust even when you've been hurt. And to our family, weird, complicated, broken in places, but held together with gold. To family, we all echoed, glasses clinking. Later, as I sat on my back porch watching the fireflies begin their summer dance, Melissa curled up beside me with my book in her hands. Grandma, I've been thinking about what you wrote in the dedication. I dedicated the book to her, to Melissa, proof that beautiful flowers can grow even in soil that's been disturbed. Keep blooming, sweetheart. What about it, dear? Do you really think people can change? Like, really change? Mom's letters, sometimes they sound different, better. But how do you know if it's real? I pulled her close, this child who'd been born from a lie but had become truth in our lives. I think people can change if they really want to, if they do the hard work of facing who they are and choosing to be different. Your mom hurt us all, badly. But she's your mother, and if she's truly trying to be better, that's something. You don't have to forgive her, and you certainly don't have to trust her right away. But maybe, someday, if she proves herself, you might choose to let her back in, just a little. Did you forgive her? I considered the question, one I'd been asked hundreds of times since the book came out. I've let go of the anger. Forgiveness, that's a process, not a moment. Every day I choose to let go a little more, not for her but for me. Carrying hatred is exhausting, and at my age, I need all my energy for living. Melissa was quiet for a moment, then said, the social worker says Mom might be allowed supervised visits next year if she keeps doing well in therapy. How do you feel about that? Scared, she admitted. But also, curious? Like, I want to know who she really is, not who she pretended to be. Does that make me stupid? No, sweetheart. That makes you human. Just remember, you're in control. You decide what feels safe, what feels right. And whatever you decide, we're all here to support you. As the stars came out, filling the Wisconsin sky with their ancient light, I thought about the long journey that had brought us here. 14 years of deception, 1 horrible day of revelation, and 2 years of rebuilding. The money Rebecca had tried to steal was mostly gone now, distributed to family and charity as intended. But what remained, the bonds tested by betrayal and strengthened by survival, was worth more than any amount. The phone rang inside, and Patricia called out, Mom, it's the producer about the TV movie. They want to know if you'd consider playing yourself. I laughed, the sound carrying across the yard where Harold and I had built our life, where I'd taught Rebecca to garden never knowing she was planning to bury me there figuratively, where Melissa and I now grew hope in the form of tomatoes and roses. Tell them I'm too busy living my life to play it on TV, I called back. Besides, no actress could capture this much sass in one old lady. Melissa giggled beside me. You should totally do it, Grandma. You'd be famous. I'm already famous, I said, kissing the top of her head. I'm Grandma Maggie, the woman who survived a betrayal, exposed a con artist with a hidden recorder, and lived to write about it. That's famous enough for me. The fireflies danced on, their brief lights defying the darkness, and I sat there surrounded by love, real love, tested love, the kind that Rebecca had pretended to understand but never really grasped. She'd been right about one thing, though it hadn't played out as she'd planned. After 14 years, she did get what she deserved. Exposure, consequences, and the chance to become better if she chose it. And me? I got what I deserved too, the truth, my freedom, and the knowledge that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. The diagnosis had been wrong in more ways than one. I wasn't dying, I was more alive than ever. As Melissa and I headed inside to join the family, she paused at the door. Grandma? I love you. Real love, not pretend love. You know that, right? I know, sweetheart. And that's the only recording that really matters, the one written on my heart. The door closed behind us, shutting out the past and opening to a future we'd build together, one honest day at a time.